What I want to talk to you all about today is something I am really excited about. So this is something we've been working with the feature teams inside SharePoint Engineering to do something pretty new. This is the first time I'm aware of the OneDrive and SharePoint group doing something like this. So we have a new capability that is GA'd, and this is a file picker V8. So this is the same file picker we use within the service itself. So we are now sharing our component or control code, however you want to think about it, with third-party developers. So you can use in your applications, whether in SharePoint Framework, whether in a SPA single-page application, whether in a remote SaaS application, you can use this new file picker in your application to open files, documents, from SharePoint or OneDrive. So you could target either place, and I'm really excited about it. The team believed in kind of the scenarios we explained to them, and the real big benefit of this is because it's part of the service, it cannot really be left behind and never updated. So as we add new capabilities to the service, we will be adding new capabilities to this control. It'll kind of flow that way. So this control may not ever necessarily be an exact one-to-one match. There might be certain flags or capabilities that don't work for third parties, but overall, it's very capable and does a ton of great stuff for you, and again, should save you a whole lot of time. And you might be familiar, there was an old version 7, not old, it was the current one until just a few weeks ago for the 7.2 picker. That's the older version. They are completely different in how they work, I'll be honest with you. So migrating is just a new integration. There isn't really a migration path between the two, but it's very much a better experience now and much more tied into the service. So this file picker, so let's talk about kind of how it is and what it works. So it is a page that lives in our service. It's an aspx page, and you communicate with it through post messages. So messaging with it through a page. So this is the documentation here. So that link will take you to this documentation I'm looking at here, which walks through setting up an AAD app, and then it talks about how it works. So there's a page for the file picker, talks about setting up the post and message ports, initiating the picker. Then we got a bunch of sample code here in this article. But as well, we also have a bunch of sample code in GitHub now for this picker. And so we have a bunch of samples, and some of these I'm going to walk through here today, but should be a way to get you started no matter the environment you're trying to build in. So just JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, with or without an SDK. You want to do it in React. It works everywhere we've tried it. So really encourage folks to check this out. And with that, I do want to sort of start to talk about how this is all set up and works, right? Let's look at some code. So I have a OneDrive here. It's a very exciting OneDrive. It's got some files in it. That's really neat, some files and folders. Love that. I also have, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time in Azure Active Directory. I have an app set up. You've all seen this before, but I just want to touch on the permissions real quick. Is files.read-write-all, and for SharePoint, myfiles.read. And so I've got those permissions consented on this application. So good stuff. This is my OneDrive again, just to sort of show you that. And then we want to go ahead and, so this is the JavaScript basic sample. And I want to start with this because it has no dependencies other than msol, and it has no tricky code to it. So it's very much a straight, just you can see it's all here in this HTML page. So it's very straightforward sample, and I think it's a great place to start and kind of talk through how to interact with the picker. And because some of the other samples kind of obfuscate or abstract away a little bit of this, but I think this is a great way to sort of step through this. So you can see here we're loading the msol browser. We do have a little auth script here that just does some msol plumbing for us. Nothing fancy there, but setting some client IDs and redirect URLs and the authority and stuff like that in this sample. But so now, the first thing of note here is this param section. Let me zoom in a little bit. Zoom in. So hopefully that's okay for folks. Somebody in the chat tell me if it is not. So these params here are all documented in the documentation. So you don't think you have to memorize this. All of these things are explained in here. But I'll just broadly say, you always say SDK 8.0. That's a fixed value right now. That may change. There might be an 8.1 or something like that. But right now, fixed 8.0. And then you've got this entry node that tells you where you want to start. This could be OneDrive or it could be SharePoint. It cannot be both. So you pick one, OneDrive or SharePoint, and files. This isn't strictly needed, but this is being a little more explicit. You include this authentication node. It explains why in the documentation, but it tells the picker control itself that, hey, we're ready to give you tokens. We have a way to give you tokens. And then you have some messaging stuff here. So you want to set up the origin, which in our case is just localhost 3000, and a channel ID. And that's the actual post messaging channel that will get set up to manage the communications between your application and the picker. I see a bunch of questions in the chat. I'm not going to be able to answer them right now. Let me get through a couple of this and we'll come back to those questions, okay? But I'm not ignoring them. And then you've got in here some settings around types and sources. So we want to pick files and we want to pick OneDrive, and we also want to show our recent pivots. So that's something in the left-hand menu there. So then we've got just some JavaScript code. You all have seen JavaScript code, I believe, before, but here is some now. So we've got a launch picker function, and that launch picker function, excuse me, is just bound to this button. You'll see the button here in a second. I believe we've all seen buttons before. And so we're just doing, we're creating a window, opening that window. The picker can be embedded in an iframe, or it can be embedded, or not really embedded, but shown in a pop-up. It works either way. And we have samples in that gallery or in that repository that show both approaches. But we need a window, and because we're going to load this URL, we get a token using umsal. Great, we've all gotten tokens. We also create a query string. Now, the query string for the file picker, and you'll see this in all of the various samples, is a JSON stringification of these parameters. So this is how you configure and control the picker. So you're going to load this window with a query string of these stringified parameters, and that is how the picker is going to get initialized. It's going to pull those params into it and do it some initialization work, excuse me there. And then you're going to create a form and actually do a post to that URL with the query string and everything. And this includes your access token, it includes the params and the query string, and then you submit that form, page will reload, you're going to get your picker. Now, we're going to set up some messaging. So the way you do that, and window.add event listener for messages. We're going to get some event source and doing just a little bit of checking there to make sure, because there can be other messages. So we're making sure it's our message. And then if it is our message, what we want to do is make sure it's the right channel ID and everything. And then we're going to go ahead and get ourselves a port, and we're going to add a listener to that port, and then start up that port and then post a message back to the picker and tell it to activate. And so that's going to go ahead and activate the picker and start it all up. And then the only other real piece of code to have a look at is that message listener that we attached to that port. So you see we're adding a message listener to that port. This is that message listener. So this is all, again, in the documentation. Don't worry, if it initially looks a little confusing, it should be all covered in the documentation as well. You can always ask us questions in the issues list. But so you get a couple different kinds of messages back from the picker. You've got notification type messages. And so messages have a type, and the type of notification is just that. It's a notification. You could ignore it. You could log it. You could show it to the user. It's up to you. But they're just notifications. You're also going to have command messages. So every command message, you have to acknowledge it. And that is just posting a message back to the port with the type of acknowledge and the ID that we just got. So we were essentially telling the picker, hey, you sent us message number 1. We got message number 1. We're going to start working on that. And then we get some data from that message, and we're going to look at the command of that message. And so this is another string value. So a command, there's several different commands you have to worry about. So I'm going to skip authenticate for just 1 second because it's easier to look first. Like one command is close. That means if they've clicked the cancel button in the pop-up window, right? The next thing is pick. This means, hey, they've picked something in me, and I'm giving you some information about that. And you could see us updating the inner HTML. We'll show that in just 1 second. I'm gonna run npm start in the background here, and then As well, we've got a default, which is our unsupported command. And then authenticate is the interesting one. So the way the picker works is every time you go to hit a resource, whatever that resource might be for the picker, it's going to ask you for a token. And that token may be one you already have. So MSOL will just give that back to you, and that's great. It might be a new token for a different kind of resource. But then you get that token and you send it back to the picker, and the picker itself allows you to manage these tokens. It doesn't do anything. It's not hidden away. And this at first might seem like, oh, I wish the picker would just do this for me. But the real advantage here is you can now do authentication how you want to do it. So you might already be doing authentication in your application. You just plug it into the picker. You might want to use, if you're in SharePoint framework, you might want to use the token provider. I'm sorry, I forget the exact name for it. And that would work great. There's a sample that shows that. So you might not have to use MSOL. There might be other options for you to get these tokens and use these tokens. But this allows you complete flexibility to control how these tokens are generated, how they're managed, and then how you send them back to the picker is just through another post message command with a result. This is a result of the authenticate thing. For all these results, you're going to include the original message ID that started this chain, and that is the data block of it, which the result is a token, and the actual token value is a token. So we'll send that back to the picker. Hey, that's great, Patrick. Let's see this run. Cool, cool, cool. So we're going to go to our great website here. You can see there's a button here. And if I hit that button, I'm going to launch the picker. You saw a little MSOL thing happen. And whoa, I can pick files out of this OneDrive. So we see the OneDrive over here. Neat. And now if I, I've lost my picker. So if I look at the picker, I can now pick those files. So if I pick this one, and you can see in this one, just real quick note, I can only pick one file at a time. That's a setting I can control. If I hit cancel, that's that close command I showed you before. If I launch that picker again, and I pick one of these guys, let's look at what we get back. We get back a great amount of data here. So this is our command is pick. And if we go look back at our code and look at, this is where we see our command was pick, and this is what we're doing. So we're just updating the inner HTML, and we have to tell it, tell the picker that we had a result of success, that, hey, we got that pick thing. That's awesome. And then in this sample, I've chosen to close that window. That's optional. You wouldn't have to do that. For example, if you were running inside an iframe, you could not close it. You could just leave it open and let them pick files, and stuff could happen. Lots of different scenarios you can support through this control. But bouncing back to this page, I, of course, make the best user interfaces in the world, but you get an array of items. So this is sort of indicating you could have multiple items here. But I get a name of that document, document.docx. I get webdav URLs, web URLs. I get its size. I get IDs. I get a parent reference. So this is great. So you can now access this file through Microsoft Graph, which would be the best way to access files in OneDrive and SharePoint is through the graph. So I encourage you to take that path. But as well, if you need to work, or it's easier for your application to work in SharePoint, here's a set of SharePoint IDs that will get you, to that thing. You've got list item IDs, web IDs, site IDs, the site URL, all this stuff you might need, as well as then some of these kind of meta values of an embed URL, list URL, and so forth. So really neat stuff. And that's, hey, that's super cool, right? But what can we do with that? Like, how else can we use that? How might we use this information to build an application? Well, the next thing I want to show you is I'm going to hop around just a tiny bit because it's a 2-presenter day and I've got some time. So we're going to kill this server, and we're going to go back up to all our samples. Here you can see all the samples. These are just the ones from the GitHub. And the next thing I want to do is look at this TypeScript SDK sample. And what this does is I'm going to also, I'm going to do code there, and then I'm going to do npm start there while that's getting spun up. So this sample is using an HTML page And then it's using this bundle thing. So this is actually doing a little bit of Webpack stuff, showing you how that might work, and then doing it in TypeScript to show you, that step. And as well, it uses this Picker API SDK. This is not published. This is a thing that is internal to the sample gallery right now. We are not sure if or who might produce an actual SDK for this picker. We're in discussions for that right now. But we have 2 sample SDKs I'll show you in just a second that you can use as examples to help build your applications. So check that out when you have a chance. But this is just one way of doing it. There's no requirement, as you saw in the first thing, of using any SDK. You can use this absolutely just raw TypeScript, raw JavaScript, do it in React, lots of different ways to do this. So no SDK is required. This is simply showing you, hey, here is a way to do it with an SDK. So we've got some stuff here that's just plumbing to set up our page. Here is, again, our parameters or our options that we're going to pass to the picker to initialize it. You can see here my selection mode is multiple, and I have a max count of 5. So what that now, previously you saw I could only pick 1 item. Now I could pick multiple up to 5. I've got my other pivots here. And again, this is the stuff we talked about, entry into OneDrive. You can see I didn't include the files node underneath it. It's not necessary for OneDrive. And then I've got the rest of this is all more or less the same, except this is just using the picker through that SDK. But that SDK just surfaces the process that we've all seen before. So let's go to our page again. And whoa, that's not right. I'm going to refresh this. And remarkably, this sample looks a lot like our other sample, except now I could pick multiple of these. So this is just sort of showing you, and you can see here, got multiple results. So same sample visually, but different code. So just try to present different ways to do this that might help you if you happen to want to approach it in a different way. And then the last thing I want to show you is a TypeScript React sample, because a lot of folks are working in React. And so I'm going to do a code of this one. Sorry, I'm closing some other windows. Code of that, and then I'm going to run npm start in this. And so in here, we are using that same other sample SDK, but we're doing all this in React now. So we've got that's going to get started and not work. So just one second. So we've got let's get to like the app.tsx. So this was just created with create React app. So nothing too fancy in that regard. It's not like the greatest, bestest React app in the world. It's just a boilerplate React app with just a little bit of stuff added into it just to demonstrate what we're doing with the picker. So you can see here, again, this common theme of setting up our options for the picker. Note a couple of things here. Now I've got some filters. I'm filtering on docx files, right? That's neat. I could also still pick multiple of those. That's cool, but I haven't set a max, right? So I could pick 1,000. I don't know what your application would do with that, but it's possible. But I could pick multiple. I've got filters now, though. I think it's neat. It's another capability you can have there. And again, you see our entries being OneDrive. I'm showing all this stuff in OneDrive just because I think it's a little clearer than hopping back between SharePoint and OneDrive. But functionally, it's exactly the same experience. You would set up the entry information, and we have samples for that, as well as documentation that covers that. But so that's really the only difference, is setting up that entry information. And then just this is some React stuff, right? This is here's our onPicked function. We're going to set results. This is use state. So I think this is probably fairly familiar to a lot of you, but encourage you to try it out. And so, looking, this is just some React stuff, right? But here's our picker button. So instead of just having a button, now we've got a React component that's a button. What's more exciting about that? So if we go look at our picker button, where's our picker button? Go to definition. It's this thing right here. So no, it's not. Where's our picker button? Boy, oh boy, picker. Yeah, so here is the actual button, right? But we have then inside this component, this is a way to do it. Again, not necessarily the way to do it, lots of ways to do it. But the way I've done it here is we got some props that have a base URL, a token, generation function, and the options, right? That function is the same thing we've seen a couple times before. We're just getting tokens. Then we've got some other use state stuff about setting the window and managing the picker. And so you can kind of see in here, we've got some use effect stuff happening. So if we have a picker, we're going to set up our notification and our logging and our error handlers. And then as well, we're going to run a quick async activate. So that SDK thing has an activate method that takes a base URL, those options, and then we're just going to say on results, use those items. So the way this picker is working in this sample is it's going to await you to pick some stuff or close that window, and then it's going to pass those results to our on results function, and which is coming from the props. So we have the on results coming from the props. And we've got use effect. This is setting up the content window. So setting the picker, using, and this SDK is built on the PnP JS v3 timeline. So you see the idea of using behaviors here. And this was this sample was a little bit of an experiment for me if the timeline was extensible to work for non SharePoint and REST request stuff, and it was. So great. And then we've got our click thing, and then we set our content window, we create a new window and open it, and that's great. And then we show our stuff. And why this sample is neat, and we're going to go back to our trusty localhost 3000. Hey, our button's in the middle now. That's new and different and cool. We're going to click it. We're going to get the same picker. Note a couple of things. Same picker, but we filtered just on docx. I could pick multiple of these things, and then I can hit select. I can hit cancel. That works. Oh, whoops. Ha, okay. That's a little bit of a bug. We'll deal with that later. Never hit cancel when you really should hit select. So we're going to hit select. And now what we're doing in the React sample specifically is showing some, because the next logical question, right, is, hey, I've got a file reference through that picker data you saw, those JSON blobs. Cool. What can I do with it? So this React sample starts to answer that question. So you can see I've got the thumbnail previews here. I could click this button. And I could preview the file using the embed link. This is interesting. We have an online services art. And so here's just some great text I wrote. It's a really interesting story. We don't need to read it now. I can also copy a link. Let's put a link to that document in my clipboard. So I can go there. That's going to open it actually in the Word app, not just the embed kind of preview. I can download that file. That's going to do whatever your your local configuration to do with the downloaded Word file is. Mine is open it, and I can also delete those files. It actually deletes those files, so I'm not going to click that because I've got 2 sample Word docs in there. I don't really need to delete one of them. But how's that code work? So it's actually really simple. So we have this files list thing, and this is the React for it that makes it all work. So it just takes these different things you can do with files and sort of makes this little table of them here, and you can do a thumbnail with that item and so forth. But interestingly, like if we look at the copy link stuff, it's pretty simple code. Once we've got the item, we can use the web URL here, and just we're writing that to the clipboard on that button click. So that's copying a link, right? Deleting is just, hey, we're going to make a request to the graph. So using drives, that parent reference drive ID, items, item ID, and we're going to delete it. So, nice and easy. Once we have that item ref, it's super easy to get going. And then as well, we got download, and then we've got preview, and all of these, you can check them out on how that works. And then thumbnail, it just is a little more complicated because we've got to get the references and stuff and then actually set that thumbnail value. So making a request and then setting some stuff to show it. So great stuff there. So I just want to close and get stuff moved over to Paolo by just encourage all of you to, where did my docs go? Check out the new file picker. It is, I think, a really amazing capability, and it's a really amazing the team worked with us to allow this to be available for third-party developers. So I encourage you to check it out. This is the first in what we are hopeful will be a number of controls along these lines, and we've got some stuff hopefully in the pipeline that we can announce soon. But just wanted to say thank you all for the time.